Hello, my name is Russell Bowers. I am a third-term master of Ohara-ryu or Ohara style Ikebana. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, and I'll be doing an Ikebana demonstration for you today. Assisting me will be Tom Maney, who is an instructor of Ohara Ikebana, and he's based out of Worcester, Mass. The first arrangement that we're going to do is called a Moribana. It's a color scheme or a design arrangement, and it will have 5 different varieties of chrysanthemum. Now, this style of Ikebana was first developed by our first headmaster of the Ohara school in Japan. His name, Bunjin Ohara. That was about 120 years ago. So this particular style has been around for quite a while. And what we try to do with this style of Ikebana, or Japanese floral arrangement, in Moribana, we try to put in the materials. Actually, the word Moribana means piled in flowers, and we try to put the materials in a sequential order across the container horizontally. Prior to the development of this style, all Ikebana was done in a tall vase. So this is really kind of a relatively new style of Ikebana compared to other styles which can go back about 600 years. This first piece is considered the subject, and in Japanese we call it the shushi. I'm going to be doing 4 additional arrangements for you today, and 2 of them will be in a shallow container, and 2 of them will be in a taller vase. Now, this first one, I'm using a way to secure the materials, and it's a concentric set of circles connected together called a shippo. Now, what's interesting about this, it's an older style or method to secure the materials into the container, and you would also see this pattern on kimono or even in Japanese architecture. But what's nice about this particular way to secure the materials is you can use the angles within these circles to achieve angles of the material. And it works really good with branch material because the branch material, as you can imagine, as opposed to these kinzan, may not easily go into the pins if the branch is very stiff or dry. So this is a kenzan, and in the final arrangement that I'll do today, I'll be using kenzan to secure the material. And kenzan literally in Japanese is sword mountain. So when you look at the pins here, you can kind of understand why they called it that. And this is nice because if you have kind of soft floral material, you can just decide to insert it in whatever angle that you want. Okay, so we're going to be using, for this first group, it's going to be yellow. And we'll use 7 yellow chrysanthemums here. The second material I'm going to put in is another primary branch, and it's called the secondary, and in Japanese we call it the shushi. So essentially these primary branches that we're going to have in here are going to frame the arrangement and basically where all the other material needs to fit in. One of the things that we try to do in this arrangement is make the materials look as though they're going in at different heights and being inserted with spacing that looks really nice. One of the challenges with the chrysanthemums that we get in the US is they don't have a lot of really great leaves on them. So, we take the leaves off that don't look very good. We can do some opening up of the chrysanthemum flower itself if we want it to be a little bit broader. And I'm using a pair of scissors that's called a hasami. It's a kind of a traditional kind of scissors that you use for Ikebana. The other interesting thing about the yellow chrysanthemum is it's actually the symbol of the Japanese emperor. And in fact, the symbol that's used has a 16-petal chrysanthemum for the emblem. You'll notice I'm doing this arrangement from behind, and I have to try to envision what the arrangement looks like to you from the front. But I'll probably do a little bit of a correction at the end when we take some photos. Okay, so this is the first color group. I think I need one more in the middle. Probably about there. All right. So one of the things about the hasami, or this particular kind of scissors or tool that we use in Ikebana, is we typically hold it like this with one finger between the handles. And sure, you can cut, or you can cut at an angle, but you can also do things if you have a branch, you can kind of shave the branch down. So it's a pretty versatile tool, and the fulcrum point in the small blade makes it very powerful, especially for branch material. All right. I'm going to use 5 branches of this palm chrysanthemum. When I first started to practice Ikebana, in the textbook, there was a picture of this arrangement with just 3 varieties of chrysanthemum in it. And I couldn't wait until I got to the level where I could practice this one. I feel like it doesn't quite have the spirit of minimalism that a lot of Ikebana has. This is a little bit, I guess, ostentatious and a little bit loud. But to me, it was just so bright and interesting, all the colors, that I couldn't wait to try it. And I've done it several times for exhibits or demonstrations. But this is the first time I'm doing it with 5 variety. I usually only do 3 variety. So thank you for this opportunity. The other thing about this arrangement that occurs to me when I look at it or do it is that someone told me one time about a story. It might have been a poem or it might have been something they read. I actually don't know for sure. But it was a story about a samurai preparing for battle. And the samurai took the bit from his horse's mouth, and he just grab some flowers from the field and assemble them into an ikebana. And one of the reasons for that was it's kind of a practice amongst the samurai to prepare for, to calm down, and get ready for a battle. So something like this is probably a little maybe loud or a little more than what he would have put together. But this definitely is the kind of arrangement that I just love the colors and the feeling that I get from it. All right. So this next chrysanthemum color group we're going to have is red. It's kind of maybe a purple. It's hard to find red chrysanthemum. This arrangement also is, if you think of a season or the seasonality of materials, this is a little bit more like fall season, like the end of summer when chrysanthemums are blooming. And one of the things I was thinking of for this demo, I said, we're going from the chill of winter to the glow of spring. But Ikebana can bring different seasons in at different times into your home. And I'm bringing a little bit of fall, but in this particular style of Moribana, it's not seasonal per se. We are using materials that would be fall-like. We're really arranging this with the intent of a color scheme or a color method. So really to show off either a gradual monotone set of colors, or in this case, it's pretty, I think, bold, going from, the bright yellows to this kind of off red, purple color. It can take hours to do a single Ikebana arrangement, so when we tried to do them fast for a demonstration, we're risking taking a lot of time and needing to talk a lot while we do the arrangement. One of the things I'm trying to do in the front here is create a kind of zigzag pattern along the front as well as kind of down the side and around the back. So this next material is also a chrysanthemum palm, but it's the flower mart, they call them kermits. A really cute green color. Now when we do these materials in Moribana, there's a few different ways to think of it, kind of like a mountain where the material goes up, or a valley where the material goes down. And it should create a feeling of depth in the arrangement. I'm also putting these in kind of odd number groups. So the yellow 7 and the red and the white that I'll be using will be 5 materials or 5 stems. very early Ikebana, they actually would take something like bamboo and wind it or wrap it with some string or twine of some kind, and essentially achieve something similar to what we get with the kenzan, that you could actually insert, the flowers into that kind of a grouping of other plant material. But it's nice to have these modern methods. All right. Thank you. And finally, we're going to use this white chrysanthemum. We'll use 5 of these. The first one that I'll place in the arrangement, I just like to frame it first, will be the object branch, which we call in Japanese the kyakushi. There's rules around the length and the angles, both, both horizontally and vertically, the angle. So if you think of these 3 flowers, they're framing the entire arrangement. So this particular batch of chrysanthemum that we use for the yellow group is a little bit weak on the flowers, so I'm going to add some leaves from the white flowers here to try to fool you into thinking that we had really beautiful leaves over here. So if I can put one of these in here, kind of hide it behind another one of these. Again, I'll have to check this from the front later, but it should look a little bit greener this way. Okay, this is finishing up the 5 variety of chrysanthemum arrangements. So we have a small audience here. Are there any questions? I can say for the Ohara school, there often is an emphasis on creating a feeling of depth, even though we don't have necessarily a really deep container. For example, some of our taller arrangements, we can have very long branches in them, and some of them going toward the viewer or even up high. But often we don't have a lot of space to actually have depth. So we do things like using a scalene triangle to create that feeling of depth, even though you don't have a lot. So I, along with Tom, my assistant today, attended Aikido, which is a martial arts class. And at the front of what we call it the shodan, we always had great flower arrangements. And the feeling to me was always that here I am getting ready to work out really hard and to practice with other martial artists. And I felt like it gave me energy just looking at those flowers. So I said to myself, well, they offer classes here, Ohara classes, and if I ever get an injury, I'll try to take those classes. And it wasn't very long after that I had a shoulder injury, and I figured I'd give it a try, and that was in 2008, and I was instantly hooked. I just never thought I would be doing floral arrangements in my life. But what I really like about it is, like, if I'm not doing it very quickly for a demo, you look at every branch material, you look at every flower, you really scrutinize how it looks. It's a very meditative practice. This is called a Bunjin arrangement. And Bunjin was introduced by our third headmaster, Konohara. And the point of this arrangement is really to reflect on a practice in Japan by Bunjin artists and people that actually followed that way. Not really the aristocrats so much, but the folks that were just amazed by and loved art from China and poetry from China. So what we try to do is use materials that would maybe be mentioned in Chinese poetry, or even be seen in Bunjin paintings. Bunjin paintings were usually done with the sumi ink that you do calligraphy with. Could you hold this branch for me? Just like that. Actually, hold it up here. There you go. So I'm going to need to get into that. Actually, if you could hold it here. Thank you. And they were, monotone black ink paintings, but they would often depict scenery from like a landscape, maybe a mountain with rocks and snow or something like that. So I'm using wire to just connect these two branches, and I'm hoping that they will stay together nicely. So this face is a little bit small for this particular branch. I'm going to just open that up like that. So if you think of this lichen-colored branch, it's got a connotation of age or being around for a long time. And one of the ideas in the Japanese aesthetic is a concept of wabi-sabi. So the idea that there can be beauty in something that's older, or maybe not a perfect line, but has experienced time. So that's what I'm trying to emphasize here with this lichen-colored branch. And then when you think of this umbrella pine, it's got meaning and connotations to it as well. The idea that it's evergreen, it's gives you that feeling that it never dies. So, when you want to wish someone a long, happy life, maybe you'd give them some pine. It's also great in the winter because it makes you feel like there's still life out there. And this final material for the arrangement is an orchid. So often in these Bunjin style arrangements, we want to show something very interesting. So, this orchid is very special. It would be very unique material that you'd want to perhaps show off. in Japan. Can you do one hand on this one? And I'm going to use some bamboo skewers through the root system here, so I don't harm the plant, but I have a way to keep it in the container. I might have to do it from the front. There we go. Is that going to stay? Good. Doesn't always want to stay. And the idea of leaving these roots exposed instead of just showing the orchid just gives the arrangement so much more texture. So this arrangement, unlike the first one that I showed you, doesn't have a prescribed rule around the branches or the materials that are used, other than they should be materials that would have occurred in probably Chinese poetry. Now what I'm going to do here, because I want to have the pine kind of face you like this in this spot, I need to prevent it from flopping over, so I'm going to cut a little slice into the branch, and then I'm going to use this bamboo skewer to basically against the container. It's going to stop it from over rotating forward, and you just get that little bit of forward look from the material. And then to finish off the Bunjin, a small incense burner. So this board's called a shiki board, and it's literally something to put the arrangement on, but it extends beyond just the container because you can have other objects as part of the arrangement. And that's Bunjin. I am not an expert of care for orchids. However, I have had orchids in exhibit arrangements that could last several days. In fact, I think the way I take care of orchids so terribly that probably would last longer than when I keep them at home. The thing you would need to do is mist the roots on a regular basis. But at some point, the orchid's going to be happier if it goes back into its medium that it needs to have, whether it's moss or... This vessel is actually made by an artist in the Ohio area, and the top is considered a lotus mouth, the way that the shape of it has almost little areas where the branches can be laid on in a particular angle. But as long as it looks like a Chinese-style vase, then that's how it should look. Okay, this next arrangement is a freestyle, free expression arrangement. So there's no rule. In fact, we'll use no water. Typically in Ohara, we don't use a glass container like this. However, if we did, we would normally maybe put some green leaf material in here so that you wouldn't see all the branches as they go in. But in this case, what I wanted to do was one arrangement that was much more modern in feel. And I was inspired by a piece that's here in the museum in the contemporary art area of a cube. It looks like a cube that's not quite finished yet. And although it might be interesting to try to do a cube with this Mitsumata material. This is actually a material that is a Japanese material, and it's dried. And I think I'm going to do a little bit different here. So in this case, the bark has been peeled off. And could you just hold this like, I think like that. You can hold it just like that, yep. The bark's been peeled off, so it's just a very dry, light material. And what I'm gonna do, instead of trying to make a cube, I'm gonna try to do kind of an unfinished circle, if that makes sense. So this is part of the arc of the circle. So I just kind of do a little bit of a twist like that, tightens it up. Okay, that should stay now. Okay, good. I'll do those at the end if you just want to leave them there. So this is like, I don't know, maybe a fifth or sixth of a very big circle. And then all I want to do is kind of create a suspended area, because this glass is going to give it the impression that the material is suspended. And this is completely free. There's no rule, other than I want to pay attention to things like, you know, color and mass of material and how they interact with each other. So you can, you know, show the front, side, or even the back of the material sometimes. Gives you a different color. And this is very dynamic. I haven't made this exact arrangement before, so the arrangement will, you're doing it with me, and it will evolve together as an arrangement for us. Okay? Protea. So this material is going to do fine for the duration of our demonstration. So I'm not worried about having water in the container. So this is another way to, instead of using bamboo, you just kind of bend the branch. And you can do a similar thing when you put it in. And by putting this in now I can put other material around it, and that kind of anchors everything to that point. Okay, and we'll use this additional dry material here, which is a seed pod of a leucadendron. I just think they give a really cool, like brown texture to this very light colored branch around it. What's nice about these proteas, they have kind of firm leaf groups that I'm able to just have this, the leucadendron pieces just stick right to it like that. I can even have one that kind of hangs down. I hope it looks good from the front. So I was just going to say anything could happen at any moment here. Thank you. Okay, and my thought, because we have a light branch here, that it may not be so easy to see, I'm just going to add the same material that's black to, maybe give maybe a shadow effect, which might make it easier to see the white, or maybe you'll just see the black material. Really depends on the background and the environment. Part of the fun is figuring out how to connect them. Could you hold that just like that? Now, one of the interesting things about this material, the Mitsumata branch, is, at least at one point in time, it was used in Japan for some of the paper to make their paper money. So just kind of ground down into a pulp, and then maybe they had a lot of this left over, which is why it ended up being handy for arrangements. But you can get this at your local florist. It's available here in the US. Yeah, could you hold that? What's going to be fun for Tom later is he has to move this. All right, good. All right. So hopefully the black branch helps draw out some of the color of the white contrast against the backdrop here. This is a free expression Ikebana arrangement with really no rule, just my idea, what I wanted to bring to you today. And since you do have the modern art in the museum, I wanted to do something that would pay tribute to that particular piece. One of the interesting things about Ikebana arrangements, when we do the traditional ones, or the ones like the first few that I showed you, they are only meant to be seen from the front. In the not so distant past Japanese home, it was very common to have an alcove in that home called a tokonoma. And these arrangements, not this kind in particular, it's a little bit modern, but the most Ikebana arrangements would be placed in that alcove and meant to only be seen from the front. So a lot of what we do is kind of a front view arrangement. We have some that you could see from all sides, and in fact, maybe this one actually could. But that's one of the reasons, at least why it's really good from your perspective to see this, because that's the intent that I have, that you're supposed to see it from the front. Going to be doing a Rimpa arrangement, which is a callback to sometime around the 1600s, when this Rimpa school of painting in Japan was first developed, but obviously continues to this day as a school or a style of painting. So you could maybe argue one way or the other if this is the best material for the container that could be used. But what I like about it is it's very wide, and what I'm going to do with this Rimpa arrangement is, if you think of, in Japan they have room dividers, or they may even have screens that move to either open up or close off segments of rooms and buildings in the old traditional homes. And if you go to Japan and you see some of those screens, you'll often see paintings on them. It could be like, celebrating spring, cherry blossoms. It could be tigers. In fact, one of the most celebrated Rimpa paintings is one that was done with simply having rabbit ear irises go across with a gold leaf for the background. So Rimpa can be done on those screens, but it also can be done like on large fans. So the arrangement I'm going to do today should kind of have an arc feel to it, as if you could paint it onto the surface. All right, the first material we're going to use is quince. And another good reason to have a kind of big container when you have big material. So this is going to be a situation where I have to treat the bottom of this branch because it won't easily just stay in this kenzan for me like this. So I'm going to first of all kind of cut it at an angle. So less of the branch needs to go into the kenzan. And then I'm just going to help it out by putting a few cuts on the branch. And then this will be the center. Now in this style arrangement, we don't really emphasize depth too much because this is really meant to emulate something that's two-dimensional painting. And in fact, these paintings were often exaggerated in the sense that they really wanted to, like if you're going to show chrysanthemums, you would just show a lot of chrysanthemums growing together. And that isn't how they would grow typically in nature or maybe even in the garden. I was very fortunate to come across this quince this time of year. And this is, for me, this is the last arrangement we're doing, and this is spring's glow to me, the beautiful little buds that are about to flower. Often we don't necessarily have to emphasize the flower buds that are open. Sometimes we can just allude to the future by showing buds that haven't opened yet, but yet they will. Well, I'm trying to imagine how it's going to look for you. And, you do that through, like, when you practice Ikebana for many years, you kind of understand how it's going to look from the front. Just even though you're looking at it from behind. And yeah, I guess that's what I'm trying to say is, I didn't do this arrangement ahead of time. I haven't seen it from the front, but in a dynamic way, I know that I want to feature this particular material in the arrangement. In fact, it's going to be the material that ties the entire arrangement together as like a common material. But the thing about quince, it's different than most materials that we use. In fact, it grows in a way that it just kind of comes up and goes off in different directions, and often you have crossing and stuff like that. So I don't want to change that. In fact, I'm trying to highlight that. If you could envision this like being painted on with a gold background, like I want to see all these like angles that are happening because it's very natural the way quince grows. So I do have these camellia leaves. There actually might be one in the bucket that has a bud, if you can happen to find that one. So this is, I guess what I'm trying to say with this is that, this is going to bud sometime around the corner, but for the meantime, it's going to serve as some nice green material at the base. No bud? Okay. So the interesting thing about Camilla, or in Japanese they call it tsubaki, is there's a connotation to the flower that grows on it. And often you wouldn't give a Camilla flower to a friend because the connotation is one that when the Camilla flower falls off, it just falls off instantly. And the thought is like as if you had your head chopped off. So, so don't give Camilla to your friend. But it does make some really nice green for the base. Yeah, I like that one. And we'll do the cabbage next, but you can leave some of those there. So it should feel maybe a little bit more flat, a little bit almost unnatural, because like I could just show you the leaves. Often in that style painting, you would just see the face of the flower as opposed to the profile. So it's okay to do that. You know, if you wanted to, you could have one that goes to the back intentionally. You know, I don't know, maybe you're trying to highlight that in your picture. And it gives a different color to the whole arrangement. In addition, I'm going to use some of these kale. So with the Rimpa arrangements, we're trying to use materials that you would actually either have seen in those paintings or would be considered Japanese materials. And I've recently seen professors use this cabbage, so I'm going to assume that it's either Japanese material or it's okay to use, one way or the other. So you see how the cabbage here is really close to the ground? It wouldn't grow like that in nature, but you might want to paint it that way on a screen. Nice thing about the kale is you can make the bud small just by peeling some of the leaves off of it. I can just do a little taller. All right, and we'll do, if we could leave this here, we'll do the iris group. Thank you. So kind of the same idea. So here we go, spring's glow, right? But iris would never grow this short. That's how I'm painting it onto the screen. You probably wouldn't get this many, well, once I'm done, you probably wouldn't get that many flowers so close together either in nature. So it's really highlighting Definitely not natural, right? But, you know, something that you could imagine that some artist would want to paint and just highlight how, you know, we've gone from the chill of winter through early spring to early summer, just all in one painting. You get all the not all the seasons, but quite a few of them. I'm going to use some of these, the grass as well. So it's like a big purple clump over there. You've got the quince across the top. Did you give me the leaves? Oh yeah, and the iris leaves that you pulled over. Maybe a little strange to have the leaves so high up. So this little group is over here kind of by itself. As a clump. And actually there was a couple quince pieces. Just using this leather leaf to fill in some of the space at the bottom. Often in this, as well as the Bunjin, so in the Rimpa and the Bunjin, we want to use the right materials, and we also want to use odd numbers of kinds of materials. And because I wanted to have the quince tying the whole arrangement together, I'm going to add this to the side here. So it even extends out from the ends. Yeah. So, one more. This one. Perfect. Okay. So this is a Rimpa. It just so happens that one of the founders of the Rimpa school, his name was Corin, and the word Rimpa is a shortening of his name, Corin, so R-I-N, and then Pa is another way to pronounce when you combine it with other words, the name for a school. So when you call it Rimpa, it's the Rin School of Painting. I do think that studying Ikebana is a lifelong pursuit that you could have, and every time you take a class or you work on another arrangement, you learn something else. I think Ikebana will teach you patience. You'll need to be patient with your teacher who's trying to teach you something, and it may take many, many classes to get that point across. You have to be patient with yourself because you will be frustrated over and over again with what you do. it'll probably never be good enough for you. But as far as like that to me is the most important aspect of Ikebana, because it's a way to meditate or focus on yourself or learn, continually learn. But also, when it comes to specific forms, you learn things about materials that you may never have known before. You may start gardening. I did, because I didn't know a lot of these materials, or I didn't have access to these materials myself in a lot of cases. The idea of minimalism, this doesn't express minimalism, but you can do styles of Ikebana, which is for tea ceremony, with a single branch in a container. Or you can get to something very ostentatious or expressive and try to tell a story with something with a lot of materials. I do personally love the Ohara school use of shallow containers because, I mean, I come to Ikebana from a perspective of nature, and one of the recent large arrangements that I did, the whole point was to picture a scene outside and bring it in so that you could envision nature on a smaller scale right in front of you. So in this arrangement, there is no rule. There's no subject, secondary, or object. In the first container, there is, but in none of the others, which is why I didn't mention it. But so there's rules along the length, or about the length of the first material that you put in, which the standard in this case would be the width and the depth of the container, except my container's bigger than the flowers, so it's a little shorter. But it's nice compact like this too, I think. And that's why on your first Ikebana class, you don't do this. Because you do incorporate things that you learned, but then you go beyond and you break some of the boundaries and the rules. It's nice to be free too, sometimes. So now I'm just going to go over the welcome arrangement that Tom and I put together. And the idea here is the Moribana that we did earlier, which was a color scheme. This is similar to what we would call a traditional landscape Moribana. So the feeling you're supposed to get is this is a scene in the distance. So you're looking off into the distance, and you can see trees in the distance, these evergreen trees. And you can see a branch in the center that represents perhaps maybe a branch that was struck by lightning, and all the leaves have fallen off of it. And then a little bit of what I've taken from, on my way here today and just looking out at nature over the past couple weeks is you'll notice a lot of bushes and trees still have their leaves on them. They're brown. And I wanted to bring that in. So these down here are representation, these hydrangea leaves that have died. They're actually meant to look like small trees or shrubs that still have their leaves on them. And then you have azalea and boxwood and some of the lichen-covered branch. And you get this feel of kind of a meadow or grass in front of it with these two circular containers with dianthus in it. So the whole feel is a far view, natural landscape that we're trying to present to you today. Okay, I want to thank you all for participating in our Ikebana demonstration today. Again, my name is Russell Bowers. I'm out of Boston. You can find more information about Ikebana and the Ohara School by going to bostonikebana.com. You can also check out our local chapter at oharaschoolma.com. And I encourage you that if you really want to try to explore or try Ikebana yourself, you can find us on YouTube now. We've got some demonstration videos on there. We're also having regular get-together video viewing parties for Ikebana, which you're welcome to join. You can look us up on Eventbrite. And I think what I'd like to just leave you with today is that this was a great experience for me. I really loved making these arrangements for you and with you. And I hope this inspires you to try Ikebana yourself. And I do want to thank Tom, my assistant today. He did a fantastic job. Without him, everything else would have taken much longer. So thank you, Tom. Thank you.